Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Today on the show, I would like to welcome Kelly Gunn, who is the owner of Nau Swim and is looking to disrupt the shopping experience. Her love of the nautical life was instilled at a young age, having sailors and seamstresses as parents. Creating swimwear was a natural desire. She handmakes reversible swimwear in Waikiki with the intention of slow fashion, sourcing recycled fabrics, and recycles all of the scraps. Her swimwear is designed to encourage confidence and boast the wild side for all women. We have so much to delve into today, Kelly. Let's get right into this. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It is a pleasure to have you on the Core Women Podcast. So before we get into your professional journey, can you describe your life thus far in one word?
Oh gosh, one word. I would say spontaneous.
Ooh, tell us more.
Yeah, I have always been one to typically say yes to a challenge or to an adventure or buy that next day flight. And I feel that I have gained and gleaned amazing experiences from it. Yeah, spontaneous. I'm a little more planned now that I'm getting older, but I think overall, yeah.
I love it. And how would you not have these amazing experiences by being spontaneous? I love that. I love the energy in that word and what that word actually entails. It means just getting up and going, having the energy. It means being inspired. It means so many things. Let's talk about your personal journey and the evolution from where you began to where you are now. Let's talk a little bit about some of the things that have really formed your values and some of your passions. Let's get right into this.
Yeah, I grew up on the East Coast. We were water babies. Our front yard was the water. My dad and my stepdad were all sailors. So from a young age, we were instilled, just being in nature and really having a passion for the environment. My mom was a little bit of a hippie. And so she made a lot of our clothes. My Grammy made a lot of our clothes. So those two passions were instilled at a very young age and kind of trickled along with me through, growing up. I was landlocked for a few years and finally made my way to the West Coast. And now I'm here in Hawaii. And I decided that it was time for me to make my own swimsuits because they're not cheap.
So let me take a few steps back. Okay, so you were from the East Coast.
Yes.
And you were raised right on the water, essentially, right? So you looked out your window and you're like, there's the water. So you've always been connected to the water in some way.
Always.
Your dad and uncle were sailors. And then your mom was a seamstress.
My mom was a Grammy.
Wow. So you brought all of that together to create something very special today. And we'll get into that. But it's interesting that, you also called your parents hippies, which I find so funny because I'm like, oh, okay, I can totally relate. My name is Summer. I wonder why. My mom was a hippie, right? Wasn't Woodstock back there too, somewhere in New York? You've done this evolution and you've started from the East Coast. You made your way to the West Coast and now in Waikiki. It sounds like you've always been connected very strongly to the water and you've done something with this. You brought forward some of the things that you were taught throughout your life based on being experienced and knowing the water and being able to live around water. That is something that is unique because coming from California, being raised in Santa Cruz, California, right on the beach, right down the road from the beach, to be away from it feels odd. And I currently live outside of Washington, D.C. So I know where there's a big pool. It sounds like you were always pulled towards the water. Is that correct?
It is. I went to college in Kansas. And so I was there for a long time. little over 10 years. And I felt like I had to make my way, and being spontaneous, I said, well, let's keep going west.
Yeah.
I've been chasing warm water and I've found it here. And yeah.
So where were you? Where did you land on the West Coast?
I was also in California. I was in Santa Barbara, Ventura area.
Again, by the water. And then you made your way to Waikiki, to Hawaii. So now that you're there, when did you realize that you wanted to start making something very personal like swimsuits for women?
It was probably about just over a year ago, actually. It's very new.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so that's exciting. So you're an emerging entrepreneur. What were you doing before that?
Well, I still have a full-time job. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, so you still have full-time work, and is this like a side hustle, or is this something that you would like to turn into like a full-time gig?
I would love it to be a full-time gig. I love my career.
Yes.
Work with the Native American population on the mainland with their facility condition assessments. And I love working for that population. So I probably still want to keep a little bit of my time with that, but I would love to grow this into more of a full-time thing.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And I love what you're doing with it. You're creating swimwear. It really blends with your history and it brings that forward, and your love for the nautical life, your love for sewing, and you make swimwear. You make swimwear that is what you call slow fashion, sourcing recycled fabrics, and you're also thinking about the community, the ecology. Tell us more about what drives this brand, what values you attach to this brand. It seems like you speak to that in just this description alone.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I have an environmental upbringing. I have an environmental degree. I wanted to incorporate the sustainability aspect, but another one that's a huge passion of mine is actually working with other artisans. So my love for travel has always been off the beaten path. And I really have that desire to get into these local communities and meet the local artisans. And so I wanted to develop that into this brand. So I actually work with other artisans to develop the prints. Each destination collection is actually a collaboration with another artist, and I kind of leave it up to them. When you think of this particular location, what is your vision and your experience of traveling to that particular destination? So it becomes a whole curated event. It's an experience for the customer as well. And I love working with the local communities and other artisans. So that's a huge passion.
I love that. So there's a lot of intention behind each of the things that you make. That is so fantastic. I just love hearing about your journey, how you've curated that journey, where it took you, and then also what you're doing today. Tell us more about this swimwear. I know you said that you like to collaborate with other artisans. So how often do you make the swimwear? Where can people find you? Where are your designs located? Like all of this good stuff. Fill in the gaps for us.
Awesome. So right now I'm sewing almost every day to get the orders out. So everything is literally handmade by me. Between the other artists and myself, so we showcase all of the designs on our Instagram. On mine, it's Nau Swim. And then on the website, that's where we're showcasing everything. I really wanted the artists themselves to have a kind of a hand in the collaboration as well. So it gets a little more visibility on both ends and hopefully provides for both of us, which I think is very cool. Yeah, so I source out the fabrics as sustainable as possible. And I recycle all the scraps. And so hopefully it's a more cradle to cradle instead of anything going to the landfill, which makes me feel good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially in the fashion industry where there's a lot of waste.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a few people on here who really are intentional about slow fashion and what that means. And they've actually made dresses for those celebrities at the Oscars using slow fashion, which I think is just commendable, and then getting across the value of that and then the intention of that. This is fantastic. I love hearing about what you're doing, how you're expanding your business, how you're collaborating with other creators. This is fantastic. And then also how you're bringing a craft into this, and your craft of being someone who sews. That's a lot of work.
It is. It is a lot of work. I have a program that I have, it's called the First Class Pass. And I actually am encouraging women who have different body types to get into that program, because then I actually custom make it for your particular measurements as well, which has been a lot of fun. And it's really nice to see women feeling confident in their suits that actually fit. And, you know, ready to wear is nice for some folks, and it's not always convenient for others. I like having that little niche of yeah, actually someone creating it specially for you, which also feels pretty fancy. And
Yeah, absolutely. I love that whole idea of the first class pass. So thank you for telling us about that. So there's so many things that we've touched on today. What would you say, because you are an emerging entrepreneur, you're new in this space for the most part, making these suits. What would you tell other entrepreneurs about being courageous, going for your goals, or the next step, or what steps they can take?
I would say, and this is still a challenge for me, is to realize, one, it's a slow process. It doesn't happen overnight, but also that the perfection, it doesn't have to be perfect to get started, and you'll learn and you'll have to adjust and adapt and figure out your path along the way. But just getting started is almost the hardest part, I would say, if you lose the feeling of having to be perfect at every single thing. I mean, it would haunt me over just my Instagram posts. I would freeze thinking I wasn't doing it correctly. And the more that I've learned and the more that I've gotten into this industry and the more people I talk to, is that nobody actually has it all figured out. Nobody is actually doing it correctly. I'm using air quotes, or perfectly, or anything like that. And so you're never going to get anywhere if you're constantly spinning your wheels of like how to make it the best or the prettiest or perfect or whatever. It's still a challenge, you know, but it's less of a challenge to at least get me moving forward.
Yeah. And I love what you mentioned there, the perfection part. The perfection part is such that that's something we internalize, right? And yet every day is different. So how can we really perfect it from day to day? Because things change, variables change, needs change, factors change. Like all these things are ever changing. So you're going to be trying to strive for something that maybe, and I'm not saying things aren't attainable, but you're going to keep reaching and reaching and reaching. And that's good to some degree. But are you going through a struggle? Are you really thriving at that point, right? And what you're doing. And then on top of it, you've also identified your passion. And that passion aligns with your values. It also aligns with some of the historical things in your life that were meaningful to you and still are. And so those are applied to this passion, which I believe helps keep it going. And if you don't know what those values are, sometimes you can stop yourself right in your tracks, because you're like, well, really, what am I doing this for? What value does this have to me? What is the purpose? What is the why? And it sounds like you figured out those values, that purpose, that why.
And, you know, I see how much my family is involved in this, even though like my Grammy's passed, my father's passed. But when I first started this endeavor, this adventure, I wasn't even thinking that. It was just kind of like innately, oh my gosh, I am like channeling my family in this, and like going back to my roots, and I'm going to tear up thinking about it. But like it's almost like I had an aha moment of how incorporated all of that was. And it's a really neat feeling that I wasn't chasing to start with. It kind of evolved into this, and I love it. And yes, so I'm very passionate about it.
And I love that, because you're bringing them with you on the journey. They're the ones who help start in certain ways the idea, the seed for the journey, and you grew your own tree from it. You're planting your own roots with that. And those are sustainable roots. It's been a joy speaking with you. But as we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, if you were to lead the listeners with one tip to support their journey today, what would it be?
I would say yes. Just say yes. What's the worst that's going to happen? I have said yes so many times on things that I never thought were possible, but I just went ahead and said yes, and let's just see what happens. And literally 9 times out of 10, it's been an amazing adventure. Places I'd never thought I would go, opportunities I'd never see myself in, but what a fun ride it's been. Don't be scared to say yes to opportunities that come up that maybe you wouldn't take.
Thank you, Kelly, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you so much. It was so fun to be here.
Thank you. You can follow Kelly Gunn at Nau Swim on IG and also on Facebook at Nau Swim and at www.nauswim.com.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women Podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.